Hello, everyone, and welcome to the Empowered Business Podcast. I'm your host, Two Eagles Marcus, president and publisher of Empowered Business Magazine. And today we have Julian Newman, founder and CEO of Culture Creative, a leading national and award-winning diversity and inclusion consulting firm based in Grand Rapids, Michigan. Since the launch of Culture Creative in 2014, Julian and his team have worked with more than 100 companies and nonprofit organizations and has spoken to more than 100,000 people and groups nationally during the past 20 years. Welcome, Julian. Thanks for joining me today.
Hey, man, I'm happy to be here, and I'm very excited to have a conversation with you, as well as excited about the launch of the magazine and all the cool things that are happening in 2021 for you.
Well, thank you. I really appreciate that. Congratulations on being a nominee for the Influential Awards, which are happening next week. I think that I'm very excited about the response that we've had from the community, and to be able to bring forward a lot of people that don't have an opportunity, or even, I don't even know if it's an opportunity, but it's just, there hasn't been an awards like this that has brought together so many different, I want to say, nonprofit, community members, business people, all in one place to let everyone know what people are up to. And it is true. They just don't. There hasn't been an awards like this. There's not an awards like this until now. And so I'm excited about what this can mean for the future of our culture in Grand Rapids. So before we get into,
it's beautiful.
Before we get into the questions, we have to talk about what is happening right now. Last night, the capital of our nation was invaded, and there is just so much to unpack with all the conversations that have been happening regarding that, and the perception of the treatment if the people that had invaded the Capitol were not white. I mean, they were all, for the most part, white, and they were kind of treated, I don't know. If they were all black and brown people, I think it would have been a significantly different outcome, based on everything we've seen so far with the Black Lives Matter protests. So tell me, what are you thinking about that right now?
Well, I think, like you, I just think there's a sense of shock, but not surprise. For me, I was saddened, to the point of tears. I was angry, and then I think there's an aspect that there's a numbness there, where we're having another conversation about. I heard somebody post something. It was one of the athletes from Boston Celtics that talked about the two Americas, and that Dr. King talked about, many years ago, in relation to what we saw yesterday with thousands of that are being called insurrectionists now, to flood the Capitol, to climb walls, to bring in Confederate flags, to loot and steal and desecrate. And for so much of the footage that we had the opportunity to see yesterday, there were no dogs, there were no tear gas that was spraying little kids and things of that nature. The things that we've seen in terms of some of the other protests against racial injustice and police brutality, inequity, where there was this militancy from the jump, National Guard and things of that nature. And so I don't think it's news to any of us that with the history, the origin story of America, that not everyone is treated the same. But I think when you look at it being so stark and so brazen and so dishonoring and disrespectful, and then how dangerous it was. You know, there are pipe bombs that were found. There were the people, the writers, the insurrectionists that there were armed. Many, you know, there were people that were armed, and so it as bad as it was, it could have been a lot worse. But when you compare that to Jacob Blake, just this past week, it was found that the police officer that shot him 7 times in the back from close range in front of his children is not charged. When we're reminded of Tamir Rice, 12 years old, who has a toy gun in his hand, being shot with no recourse. And so you look at these stories, you look at this history, you look at this backstory, and then you juxtapose that with, the story of the enslaved African. You look at that in terms of, brown people, the indigenous. Here we are in January, but in November we were talking about Native American, the month, to Heritage Month, and so we have to reconcile our origin story. Yes, we're all hopeful for a hopeful future in 2021, but we're not going to be able to maximize our opportunities if we don't reconcile our history. And so yesterday was just another reminder of that. And the tendency that some have to excuse away the behavior of some and demonize the desires of others. And so we can't equivocate. Wrong is wrong, and we have to call it what it is. And I think that it's important for us we need leadership in this hour. And we need that in a macro sense, but we also need it in the micro sense in terms of you and I have the opportunity in our spaces and places of influence to be able to lead and to be courageous, I think, in this very significant cultural moment. And I think we're all trying to process it still because it was, less than 24 hours since we saw those images.
We're still in it. And
yeah,
there's no question when you have police officers rolling up on children, jumping out of the car and immediately shooting them, compared to what we just witnessed and anything can happen from now on. I mean, nothing at this point is surprising anymore. It's kind of like, well, it didn't. I'm surprised it didn't happen. A lot of it didn't happen sooner. But the gaslighting in when it comes to when we make the comparisons of what happened during the Black Lives protests versus what's happening now during Black Lives Matter, which is still active. It's not over. I mean, that's Black Lives still matter. And of course they do. But my point is, Black Lives Matter was inspired out of the pain and anger of being murdered for having black skin. That's why that happened, to rise up against being murdered unjustly. And what happened last night was anti-democracy and going against the outcome the actual outcome of the election. There has still not been any evidence that there was fraud in the election. And now when they actually see that what was actually, they are so, I mean, I don't want to point fingers on something and make false claims, but the black vote was clearly a lot larger. There was more of a representation of black vote and even Native American voting and brown voting, which there is evidence of voter suppression throughout history. And even today, there's evidence of voter suppression. And then the Native American community, they have tried to make rules or say, one of the things with Native Americans in voting as well, in order for you to vote, you have to have a street address on your ID. Well, on Native American reservations, there are no street addresses. So that was one way to try to suppress the vote. Another way to suppress the vote is when it comes to reservations, a lot of Native Americans live in poverty. So they do not have access to vehicles. So one of the other tactics was to make the only accessible voter areas to be hundreds of miles away. So they couldn't get to it. And by actually making it accessible through mailing and changing those policies that have been designed to keep down the brown vote and to keep brown people from accessing equality when it comes to that, now they're surprised that, and they say, oh, well, obviously with this many brown people voting now, it must be fraud. It can't be real.
Yeah. Well, I think, man, you talked about the Black Lives Matter movement. You talk about, the plight of marginalized, people racially in this country. And I think it's really important for us to have discussions and conversations like this and take the urgency of the moment and use it as a catalyst for us to create equity and opportunity for all of us and not just some of us. And the thing that I believe is a significant component in these conversations is we talk about, voter suppression, and we talk about gerrymandering. We discuss making it more difficult for, people that are marginalized racially, whether they be in urban centers or because of segregation, ghettos were formed, or reservations, and all the different things that we're talking about. It's easy for us to talk, it's easy for certain groups to talk negatively about these marginalized people because there's no relationship. And so as we sit there and we look at, the history, our origin story of America said these people are human and other people aren't. These people deserve access and these people don't. These people are to be used for their wealth or their labor, their land. We're going to do these things. And as a result of that, we've created not just a physical hierarchy, but an ideological or a human one, in the sense that these people are human, these people are other. And so as we are in this cultural moment where Washington is under siege with people that have Confederate flags and all sorts of different paraphernalia. There was a dude that was wearing horns yesterday, and other folks, you're like a Viking or something, conspiracy theorists and things of that nature. We're in this polarized moment. People are arguing on Facebook and social media and, lobbing digital insults, over the wall of their mobile device. People don't have relationship with the people that are different than them. And so if I live in my bubble, if I live in my silo where I kind of Netflix my world, like on Netflix, where if I watch one movie, it gives me a recommendation of a movie like the other movie that I watched. And if I watch the second one, I get a third one like the first movie. Well, in many ways, we've created these silos where it's sameness. It's all the same. And so I'm not having a discussion with somebody who has that political perspective, or I'm not having coffee, obviously pre-COVID, or a Zoom meeting with somebody that is Black or brown, or they speak a different language than me, or there was somebody in their family that was undocumented. We have to have those engagements with people that are like them, but the them is not necessarily like us. And in that engagement conversation, I believe that we find that underneath all the stuff, there's a commonality of humanity that we have to engage in. And so one of the things I'm really passionate about is we're better together than we are separated and siloed. And if we can come together, we can build a more beautiful world that's not just about some people, but it's about all people. It's not just about, some of us, it's about all of us. And I don't know if there's anybody that doesn't believe that from a conceptual standpoint, but our operational, the operational data or the showing and not just the telling, there's a huge gap between those two. And we got to do better. We must do better. We must.
So, I mean, yeah, we have to do better. And I think that knowledge and knowledge sharing and creating community amongst people that don't typically associate. I mean, that's how I think that there's a fear with the unknown, and they just see what's happening on TV, or they drive through a neighborhood and they're like, I'm going to just stay in my place. And they don't want to connect. And that's part of, that's part of my vision for, Empowered Business is to create for other cultures to learn about each other. And I'm not talking just between white and brown. I'm talking about every culture, because there's bias no matter what. It doesn't matter what color people are, or what their ethnicity is, or what their social standing is. There's always some sort of bias because of whatever their experiences have been, or they have one interaction with a type of person, and then they're like, well, this one time I met this kind of person and this happened. So they create this sweeping generalization that all of them must be like that. Or I met two of this kind of person in my life, so all of them are like that. But it's not even, it isn't about one thing such as skin color, or there's more to it. And it just really, if you see the kids that go to schools that are more racially and ethnically diverse, they just are like, hey, these are my friends. Like it's not about, they don't notice the skin color thing. Like it's not a conversation. They're just like, hey, I'm around all these different kinds of people all the time. They speak different languages, they do different things, but we just hang out. Where when you go to a school or put in a situation where it's very monoculturist, then there's a really separation between us and them, because usually in a monoculturist, not usually, in a monoculturist kind of situation, everybody's that one way. So when one person comes in, they're like a real almost alien to the situation. Then that leads into literally the culture of, they're not going to last very long as an employee or whatever. They can't fit in because they're not accepted. But let's switch. I mean, we could talk about what happened yesterday endlessly. And it is a conversation that's going to be much more apparent. And I'm not glad that it happened, but now that it's here, it's something that we have to face as a country. And it's the exposure of it and showing this is the escalation that just happened. And from here, we can go much in a terrible direction faster and farther. So we have to work together to find out what the solutions are to make sure this doesn't happen any longer. But I would like to now talk about, tell me about how regular people can change the world, and what are the 6 components of the transformation process?
Well, man, I think the first thing is we have to have a desire to do that. And so there has to be a catalyst for a changed world. And in transformation and change is rooted in vision. And I can't have a different vision if I don't have a desire first. And so I think the first thing is developing a vision that is based in passion and purpose. I think another part of transformation is challenging our comfort zone. And so we all have comfort zone. You talked about bias. And so We can, reduce bias to something like, hey, someone is offering me a different dish of food that I'm not necessarily familiar with. And I was told that, food from those type of people or from that position is this, that, and the other. And I say that because I can be real finicky, and I like to say selective when it comes to, food and nutrition for me. So that's something that my family kind of talks about. But beyond having a vision and beyond having a desire, we have to take risks. There has to be a space and a place where we show some courage. Because again, we all have a comfort zone. But in order for us to bring change, we have to get off the couch of our comfort zone, if you will. And so beyond, challenging our comfort zone, I believe that we have to, and use this word earlier, we have to build community. And so, building community is not just sharing my story, but experiencing the story of other people and creating space for them. I think another important aspect of that is really listening. We got a lot of people that are shouting and talking right now. We have a lot of, experts, and we have a lot of people that are saying this, that, and the other, whether it's COVID, whether it's a political conversation, a cultural conversation, or what have you. But are we really taking time to listen? And I listen better when I care for, or dare I even say love, those that I'm engaging with. And love is one of those things that the first thing we think about is, Valentine's Day, or, chocolates in a box that we give to somebody that we care about. But I think really at the core, love is really giving ourselves to a mission that goes beyond our self-interest. And so when I give myself to a mission that goes beyond my personal self-interest, then I can build community from a foundation that has some momentum. And I think another thing that is important in relation to transformation is truth. And when I talk about truth, I'm not just talking about factual truth. We're in an age of alternative facts and things of that nature, but we have to bring our truth to the table. And so part of our truth to the table is I'm afraid about this. This bothers me. This challenges me. I'm scared. I'm afraid. I feel powerless. And so some of the anger that we see, I believe, in our culture, in our generation, is rooted in fear, rooted in not willing to be vulnerable or honest or bringing our truth to the table, because, anger is a masking emotion in so many ways. And so I believe that as we engage, as we show courage, as we build community, as we love, we engage and we bring our truth to the table, then I believe that we can learn something unique, not just about our brother or our sister or those in our community that we're trying to create, but I believe that we learn something significant about ourselves. Because it isn't just them, whoever them are, they need to change, grow, expand, and experience. We do too. There was a quote that I read years ago that says, "I've seen the enemy, and the enemy is us." And I love it because it illustrates that the problem isn't just outside of me, but the problem is within me, and I'm part of the problem. And so as we authentically come face to face with our own fragility, our own bias, our own prejudice, our own lack of empathy and understanding, then we have the ability to be able to expand it. Sometimes I've said when we say that we have it, it communicates and illustrates that we don't. but we acknowledge that we don't have everything that we need, then it gives us the platform to be able to expand and go beyond that.
So with the truth, I think that a lot of people, especially for men, I think that men have a way of not letting their feelings out. They have to maintain, and this goes to mental health too, that they have to maintain that they have everything under control. They're not affected by different challenges or different fears. And so that can show up as silence or anger. And I think that that's really important to be able to, but there's always this thing that you want to appear that you have everything together, that you're not afraid, that you're tough. And I think that and you don't want to show weakness. So then I get it with the truth. It's being able to actually express your truth and letting yourself be vulnerable is very difficult, and it can come out in different ways. So the 6 components are desire, courage, community, listening, and then what is the 6th component?
Loving.
Loving. Okay. Yeah. That was one too. Is people don't. I think that we all need to work on our listening, because I think that we have a tendency to say, well, I think your experience is this, and they try to tell people what their experience is. And I think that if we had more empathy for people, where we're actually hearing them when they say, yeah, I live in fear because I think that when I get pulled over, the police are going to murder me for no reason. And then there's another group that's like, no. Mm-hmm. But that group they don't see it on TV, and they don't have that lived experience. Mm-hmm. And I think that it's a place of privilege not to have to think that you're going to be murdered when you're pulled over by the police. It's so easy for them to say, well, if you just obey the law and if you aren't aggressive, you won't get murdered. Or it's a way of victim blaming. I see it so many times we all see it. They'll say, it could be in any situation. Well, what were they wearing? Why was someone murdered? Oh, they were wearing a hood? Well, duh, they were wearing a hood. And it's like, you should be able to wear whatever clothes you want, as long as you are not like coming at them with a weapon or like. It's still, you can see the difference in restraint when it comes to one group versus the other group. And I know I kind of took us back to out of the how regular people can change the world, but I'm just trying to show that with that particular those components there, people have to start coming to the reality that they need to reflect on what it is they're doing, and you can't just say that doesn't apply to me. I'm not affected by it. You have to start listening to what's happening and find out and become a part of the solution. And instead of just saying, oh, that doesn't apply to me, everyone has to work together to make sure that this happens. How we change the world together.
Yeah, and I would say that part of the change in the world, just in a real concise way, is stepping into the story of someone else. And so I can invalidate somebody else's experience if I've never experienced it. And if I don't have a relationship with that individual or that community, then it's even easier for me to dismiss it. You brought up something earlier and said that, I can have an experience in largely a negative experience with a person in that group. And then I can put that experience on every person that looks like them. Mm-hmm. And so a lot of times we do that because we have unprocessed pain connected to negative experiences. And so I can remember a time when I was a high school student, 100 years ago, and I was playing football. And we went to an area of the city, and I lived in Sacramento, California at the time. And we would drive to play one of the teams in an area of the city that was largely country. And so there were people that had cowboy boots and riding horses and the cowboy hats and all those things. And they would say negative things about us, racial stuff. They yelled at the bus and all of that. Well, years later, as I was a youth director in a nonprofit, one of the students that I was supposed to help mentor and oversee had cowboy boots and a big belt buckle and wore a big, 10-gallon cowboy hat. And right away, when I saw this young person that was not connected to this negative experience, I did not want to interact and engage. Because though I wasn't aware of it at that particular moment, I was bringing him into this negative experience that I had not processed. And because then I was projecting that negative experience, he was wearing the lens or the mask of that other scenario. And it wasn't until I began to take a look at myself that I recognized, as a person who comes from a marginalized community, here I was, I'm looking at this cowboy hat wearing young white male as being connected to this group that he had nothing to do with. And so that's one of those scenarios where I have to check myself. There was a song back in the day, you better check yourself before you wreck yourself. And so we have to check ourselves, because if we don't check ourselves in the process of trying to check other people, we wreck all of us. And so it isn't just them, it's me. It isn't just that group, it's mine. It isn't just those folks. I have to sit there and look in the mirror and deal with myself. And as I come to grips with my own blindness, then I have the ability to see much better. And as we're sitting there talking about, diversity, inclusion, equity, and belonging, as we talk about those particular things, we are both the leader influencer, like we're trying to make change. And at the same time, to do it well, I think we also have to be open to be changed ourselves along the way.
Yeah. And with that conversation, how does that apply to a group such as the MAGA Trump crowd? I mean, they clearly dress a certain way. I mean, you can, but that's more of an attitude that I think that the MAGA is an attitude that has a uniform that goes along with it, where I think I guess the cowboy 10-gallon hat cowboy kid was more of that just happened to be the attitude of some of the people that happen to dress that way.
Absolutely. Absolutely. I think that, there were some kids that happened to be wearing cowboy hats that made racial comments. That doesn't mean that everybody that wears a cowboy hat by extension is racist or they're prejudiced or what have you. That wasn't an experience that I had that I projected on someone else that was not connected to that. There was no message in the cowboy hat. There was no slogan. There was no ideology. He was just wearing a cowboy hat in the same way that someone would wear a hoodie or a hat to the back or some Jordans or whatever. I think when we talk about people that are connected to an ideology that in many ways, can be destructive or can be divisive or can be polarizing, I think it boils back down to relationship. And so am I willing to listen? And am I willing to listen? Am I willing to learn? Am I willing to step into the story of someone else that has a very different lived experience than me? And can I share my journey as well? Because again, if we're going to build a more beautiful world, if we're going to be bridge builders, that means that we have to build bridges across valleys or chasms or gaps. They're going to take us out of our comfort zone. And so I think we have to do that, especially now in this, polarized cultural moment. Hey, I need to have a conversation with somebody that is different than me. I need to have a dialogue and build community, at least, and maybe even for a moment, for a half hour or maybe an hour, to say, hey, man, please help me understand where you're coming from, because I don't get that. And so, again, if I just hang out with, have conversation with, I would just engage with people that believe what I believe, think the way I think, worship the way I worship, vote the way I vote, live how I live in the neighborhood, then we're never going to be able to build bridges, because there's no need for a bridge to myself, And so we have these like words that we use or phrases that we employ, bridge building and build, community. Those things sound awesome, man. And they're great on the website and on the communication materials. But where we actually live in that and we're walking it in addition to just talking it. And I think that's where the rubber meets the road in terms of bringing transformation to the atmospheres, environments, and the ecosystems that we're existing in culturally as leaders and as influencers.
Yeah, and when it comes to those ecosystems, I think that a lot of not a lot of times, most people look at life in terms of like there's the business life and the personal life, but it's really all one. I mean, businesses are made up of people. People make up communities and cities and the states and the nation and the world. So one of the things that I try to express when I'm making a lot of my posts, mostly on LinkedIn, is that, when it comes to business, typically it's referred to B2B, B2C, but ultimately I like to say it's H to H, which is human to human. Every business relationship is based on a human relationship. Like they have to have that connection in order to get the transactions or make create the know and the like and the trust from those human interactions. And that's the same thing when I look at the society and the ecosystem, is that a business is in a community that's made up of members of the community, or it should be. And I really think that it's going to take the culture changes of business in order to create the societal changes, because you have to bring the people from the community into that business ecosystem so they can create the value in their communities. And if you exclude them from it, then they're never going to be able to empower themselves and rise up. Especially when we have the other policies in those communities that are excluded. But those policies exclude them from getting into companies because of they don't have access to housing, they don't have access to food, they don't have access to education. The main thing is the education, but how are you going to have access to education if you're too hungry to focus on what you're doing, or if you don't have a stable household? So there's a lot of work to be done, but I think that it starts right now. Part of it is making sure that we have the diversity, equity, inclusion, and the belonging in the organization. So how does a company take a first step when if they don't have a diverse organization and they want to? What is the first step? Is it a diversity inclusion training?
Well, I think training obviously is part of that. When at Culture Creative, we do that. But if I'm in a homogeneous organization, what is the first step? I think one of the first steps is recognizing that training obviously is an important part of it, but you brought up policy and procedure, and so I have to begin to look at my policy and procedures that create the atmosphere in which we exist within. And so how did we get here and how do we get there? I think a big step is understanding, again, vision. Where do I want to ultimately go? And so where do I want to go? And what are some steps that we need to take to be there? I think a lot of organizations say, okay, if we do some training and we have some sessions and some workshops, then that's going to be great. And that is a part of having a strategic plan or strategy to be able to get to, or to maximize, or to actualize our vision. But though it's a part of it, it is not the plan, it's a part of the plan. So for example, if we wanted to, it's the brand new year, we want to get in better physical condition, and let's go do that. So does going to the gym include that? Okay, yeah. Or does it exercise? Yeah, that include that. Does it mean that I need to eat a salad? I need to change my, yes. But eating a salad is not a fitness strategy. It's a part of the strategy, but it isn't the strategy.
And
if I eat a salad every Thursday, if I eat a salad every Thursday, that's cool. But if I do the same stuff I was doing before, though the salad is good, it's not going to change and transform my reality. And so one of the first steps is determining, who do I want to be and where do I want to go? And so let's set the strategy. Let's assess our system, and then we could create tactics and action steps to be able to actualize that vision. A lot of times, if I'm in a homogeneous company, hey, we got to do something. We got to make something happen. We have to. We see everything that's going on. George Floyd, Ahmaud Arbery, Breonna Taylor, Jacob Blake, et cetera, all the things that we've been talking about today. Well, that crisis becomes a catalyst for me to want to do more. And that's great. But crisis, though it can stir us to action, it can't be our ultimate vision. And the reason why it can't is because when the urgency of crisis begins to shift, we don't feel it the same way. If the crisis is our vision and not just our catalyst, our vision goes away. And so one of the first steps is determining our vision and assessing my present reality and building a pathway from my present reality informed by our past to be able to move into a new future.
Now, do you think that, if you had a monoculturist organization, where do they find, I think that there's a tendency for, like one of the arguments I see now, and this is an argument that up until recently that I think about a lot, and that is the performance factor when it comes to an organization that has diversity, and that's culturally, that's ability, that's age-wise. But when I think of specifically an ethnic culture, that's one of my arguments, is that an organization is missing out. But then I start to think, well, when you put that as one of the arguments, then that just puts a value on brown skin, oh, well, it didn't make sense to us to have a diverse organization. Oh, wait a minute, we can make more money, let's do it. So then it's frustrating because they don't see the value for brown skin until they see that it could potentially make them more money. Then they say, okay, maybe it's time to reconsider. What are your thoughts on that?
Well, I mean, obviously there's a business case for diversity. And for some organizations, that's going to be their motivation. And so I think our job as people that are trying to bring diversity, inclusion, equity, and belonging to organizations in our community, and et cetera, et cetera. Our job is to help guide. We have to help lead. We have to help influence. If the motivation to get on the road or the pathway to transformation and change is the business case for, then it's the business case for. I can't, get into someone's heart. I can't necessarily get into somebody's head. I can influence. And if that's the reason why someone moves or an organization gets on the pathway, then so be it. It's the same way that crisis or culture, the cultural atmosphere has been very catalytic to a lot of different organizations in 2020. And so, well, hey, this happened. This was bad. I'm going to read a book. I'm going to educate myself. Well, maybe if this catalyst didn't happen, then maybe I wouldn't be educating myself. We can argue about the why, but if you're on the pathway, then I think that's good. Some organizations recognize the business case for, but also recognize that this is just the right thing to do. Yeah. This is just what needs to happen. And those are that's wonderful, where, hey, this is the right thing to do. We got to do this. But businesses are exist to make a profit and to position the business to do better in whatever industry that I'm in. And if diversity, inclusion, equity, belonging is going to be catalytic to that, then, hey, hooray. And there are times where organizations know it's the right thing to do, but they haven't come to grips with what you brought to the table in terms of this is an opportunity for us to do better. And so one of the things that I talk about sometimes is I'm a sports guy. I love basketball and love football and things of that nature. But I look at Shaquille O'Neal. Shaquille O'Neal is one of the top 50 greatest players of all time amazing center, played for, I think, 6 different teams. And I'll say, can you envision building an all-time greatest team? But all your players, you had 5 Shaqs, okay? So Shaq was playing center, power forward, small forward, shooting guard, and point guard. Now, from a talent standpoint, if we could put a number attached to his talent, you're going to be off the charts. But man, if Shaq is your point guard and your small forward, and all those dudes are like 7'1", 330, you're going to have a difficult time. So though your talent level is high, your diversity minimizes your capacity. And so if you have a diversity of talent, you throw maybe a lesser talent, but a smaller guy running point guard that is able to do the skills at a higher level, you have a more successful team. And so when we look at homogeneity, it's basically running on the court with 5 Shaqs. And in order for us to elevate, we've got to have some different talent on the team in order for us to maximize our organizational potential.
I love that, running on the court with 5 Shaqs. Yeah, that's a really great way to put that. Now, what is it that how can empowered business help you in your efforts or in the community, or even on a national level? Because I think that part of the progress that's really going to help is to not only expose people in our area to local voices such as yourself, but also national voices, but also to take your voice and help amplify it. Because the more of us that work together and have these discussions, I think that more discussions will happen. And I think that that's how we're going to make change. It is learning about each other and connecting and creating community is how this is going to happen.
Well, hey, man, I think what can you do? I think you've done some of that already. The fact that we're having the chance to be able to talk today, and the fact that, I get to be a part, Culture Creative gets to be a part of this larger community of, change, world changers and transformation agents is pretty awesome. So I feel good about that, to be a part of the Avengers of, Empower Magazine. So that's cool. I would also say that I would love to, be connected to, hey, if there's anybody that's in the community that is either an organization that wants to maybe go on the diversity, inclusion, equity, and belonging journey, we would love to be connected to them, or there's someone that they know organizationally that needs some help. I mean, Culture Creative does that type of work, and that's great. But I think in addition to that, the third thing would be to continue to challenge people to get outside of their comfort zone and build a relationship with someone new. Maybe in 2021, that's what we need to do. That in 2021, we are going to get outside of our comfort zone and have a conversation and build community that someone's outside of our circle. And I believe that if we can continue, if we can do that, take that one action step, that one keystone habit, to use, I think, there's a book called Habit, and I can't remember, I think it's Charles Duhigg that came up with that, the keystone habit. That one thing can open up doors to so many other things that are positive. And so that is exciting. And I believe it can be transformational to the Greater Grand Rapids community, as well as the world around us.
Absolutely. Comfort zone is really, it's everything. Everything, it's almost like all of it goes back to comfort, when the people that have the comfort don't want to lose it. They're like, well, my life is already easy. Why do I want to make it more difficult? But in order for us to have, I mean, even if you do want to think about your own comfort, and I'm talking about the people that have the comfort right now, they're going to lose that comfort eventually. And the reason why is because the economy is going to collapse if we do not invest in the historically excluded people, Native Americans, Hispanics, Black. I mean, those communities are growing. There's not enough jobs. There's not enough opportunities. And those communities are going to create the job opportunities for their own people. And our economy depends on it. So whether the change is going to be intrinsic or extrinsic, at some point, it's going to happen, or the economy will just collapse.
Well, I think, I like to think that, one of the things that keeps me going and keeps me motivated, as we were talking about motivation earlier, is this belief that we can do it, this belief that we can build a more beautiful world, this belief that we can come together, and we can look at the challenges that we face, whether it be economically, whether it be relationally, racially, culturally, et cetera, that we can, as the challenge rises, we can meet it. And I think that collective hope, or that belief, is one of the reasons why I do this work. It's one of the reasons why Culture Creative is Culture Creative, and our tagline is, a beautiful together. Because if we're not reaching for something that is beautiful, then, man, what are we doing? And, I think that's the reason why the back end of the I Have a Dream speech resonates so deeply, is because there's this beautiful together crescendo of this great oration at this iconic moment. And for those that have never actually read the whole speech, they actually should, instead of that last like 30 seconds. But what I would say is that crescendo, and I say that because there's a whole lot of amazing stuff in this speech way before the ending, finale or stanza. But I think the reason why it resonates is because there's this element of hope that at the core of us, we all want to carry. And as we've gotten older, some of that childlike wonder might have gotten choked out through the bumps and bruises of life. But I believe it's in that hope that it gives us the momentum to be able to bring change. And so, that means that we still have to have hard conversations. We still have to look at ugly things. We do still have to navigate inequity and all the different stuff that is out there. We can't be Pollyanna in our pursuit or our methodology to be able to deal with difficult things. But our motivation is the good. Our motivation to go to that fitness class and get on that bike at 6 a.m. in the morning is because this next summer, my beach body is going to be banging. So I'm going to get out there and I'm going to do this thing. And so the reason why I go through the difficulty of the spin class at 6 a.m. in the morning and get sweaty, it's inconvenience, I got to get up early, is because this next summer, man, my triceps are going to be busting out. And so it's the hope of the future that gives you the motivation to press through the resistance of the now. And so for me and for our group, for our organization, Culture Creative, we want to partner with companies that want to help make that happen for our community and for our world.
I love that. I love the ending on that, the hope for the future to push through the resistance of the now. And that's exactly what is happening. And that's a great place to end this conversation. Yeah. I really love that. I love that. And I love A Beautiful Together. We all are all working to a beautiful together. And those are two really great statements to end that on. So finally, Julian, tell me how somebody can contact you. What's the social media, email, website address?
Oh yeah. You can find us at culturecreative.tv. You can follow us on Instagram and on Facebook. We are Culture Creative. I'm on LinkedIn. I'm on Instagram, Facebook, and Culture Creative is also on LinkedIn as well. So if you're out there and you want to continue the conversation, or you want to look to maybe Culture Creative partnering with you along your journey of diversity, inclusion, equity, and belonging, we would love to hear from you.
Great. That's awesome. Well, thank you so much for your time today, Julian. I feel truly inspired by hearing what you had to say. The hope for the future is pushed through the resistance of the now. That's really something I'm gonna make a point of expressing that. But thanks. You so much again for today, and I'll talk to you soon.
All right. Thank you.
Thank you so much for joining us today. I am your host, Two Eagles Marcus, founder of EmpoweredX, Empowered Business and Empowered Talent. If you haven't already, please subscribe and leave a 5-star review on the EmpoweredX channel to get weekly access to the BIPOC action takers and change makers in business, entrepreneurship, and social justice. Remember, there is no community without unity, and it is essential that we all work together to ensure a prosperous and sustainable future. Stay strong, never stop learning, and never stop moving forward.